The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.
Hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast with me, Thomas Duncan. There's a lot of action this midweek in Scottish football with the League Cup quarter-finals taking place, as well as Scotland taking on Belgium on Tuesday in the Women's Nations League. But we're going to start with the League Cup, and joining me to look ahead to the four ties is Barry Anderson, who covers Hearts for the Edinburgh Evening News. Barry, another defeat of the weekend. With all that in mind, just how big a game is this for Hearts away to Kilmarnock in the Cup?
Every game's a big game, isn't it? Because the start of the season just hasn't been what people expected and what the club wanted themselves. Form's not been great. Lost again at the weekend against St Mirren after beating Aberdeen the previous week at Tynecastle in the league. So people, I think, would have expected that was a result, maybe drew a line in the sand and they could build from there. Hasn't happened. Lost 1-0 at St Mirren on Saturday, and probably one of the last places you want to go after a result like that is away to Kilmarnock in a cup tie. So they've got everything to try and make amends for, you could say.
Yeah, just looking at it, they've lost 5 of their last 6 in all competitions, 3 of the last 4 in the league. Obviously had a good win at home to Aberdeen, it must be said. They've only scored 4 goals in the league. I think that's the second fewest after St Johnstone, but they've only conceded 3, I think. So when you're looking at it, you're watching them every week. What are the issues that you see and that maybe some fans are concerned about?
I think, you pointed out the defensive stats there. The defensive stats are better, but I think the goals that they've been losing have been cheaper. Certainly Saturday's one, the way it was just left by a number of defenders. I think there was a shout from the goalkeeper. He didn't collect it, and Ryan Strange just knocks it in at the back post. So that's obviously a concern. They've only scored in 2 of their 6 league games. So the other 4 they haven't managed to find the net at all. So that's clearly an issue as well. They've only got 1 away league win this calendar year, which was at St Johnstone at the start of the season. And in all, if you look at their last 23 games in all competitions, they've only got 6 victories altogether. So I think you can see there's what the issues are. There's not enough rhythm, there's not enough flow. They aren't scoring enough goals. I think they certainly lack it. They have a lot of the ball, but they do lack a creative force in the final third. And they lack a bit of pace up top. So they would be the main things I think that would stand out.
And obviously Stephen Naismith, where does he come into the picture in terms of, I think there is a difference when people say a manager's under pressure between what the fans think and what the fans feel, and if the fans feel the manager should be under pressure, and whether the club inside the 4 walls at Tynecastle, if they feel that the manager needs results. So what's your analysis of that situation? I suppose it feels like he's maybe on a sugarier peg with fans than he is actually with those in charge at the club.
Yeah, I would say that's probably accurate. I think it's probably too early for anybody to start pulling a trigger at Hearts. I don't think that's how they tend to do things. They tend to give things a bit longer, and they'll certainly want to give Naismith a bit longer, I would suspect. And he's frustrated, understandably. This is not how he wanted things to go. I think realistically, when you look at the European campaign, it was always a tough order for them to try and get through there and get into the group stage. But that aside, given the league fixtures that they were given at the start of the season, most people would have looked at that and said, yeah, that's a decent run of fixtures for Hearts. They should be able to build up a bit of momentum there before they get into October and they're playing against Hibs, Celtic and Rangers. Well, we're almost in October now, and they're sitting 6th in the table, and it's not the run of the results, as we said earlier, just haven't been what they're looking for. So the buck stops with the manager in any club. That's definitely the case. And Stephen Naismith knew that long before he took this gig. So I think the next, you've got the Kilmarnock game on Tuesday night. That's a big one. You can't be, you won't want to be going out of the cup when there's a possibility of getting to a semi-final. Then you're away at Ross County in the league. And after that, as I said, you've got Hibs, Celtic and Rangers coming up. So it's a huge month ahead for Hearts. Huge month for Stephen Naismith, but a huge month for his coaching staff, and a huge month for some of the players, some of whom haven't covered themselves in glory so far this season.
Yeah, do you think that's just down to, obviously it's still very early, the new signings are bedding in, people always focus on some of the big players. Lawrence Shankland hasn't maybe looked himself, but I don't know if that's, you're watching Hearts every week, is he getting enough chances in the box? Is he having to come deep? But he's not. He's certainly not buying them as you would expect. So, is that an issue? Is it his form, or is that just the way the team are playing?
I wouldn't level it at one player, to be perfectly honest. I understand what you're saying about Shankland, and he certainly looks frustrated at the way things are shaping up behind him. There haven't been enough opportunities for him in the penalty area, and Saturday was another example of that. The new arrivals have flattered to deceive so far, if I'm being brutally honest. Probably Frankie Kent is the only one that you would say has come in and improved the team. The others have been very stop-start, fits and starts. So it is only September, we should point that out. It's too early to be judging. Most of the Hearts' newer arrivals have come in from different continents, different leagues, and are still getting to grips with Scottish culture and Scottish life, apart from Scottish football as well. So that's definitely a factor, and it is too early to judge overall. But you would want a little bit more over the coming weeks, and you'll need a little bit more over the coming weeks given the games that are coming up. Yeah,
absolutely. As you say, Kilmarnock Rugby Park's probably not the place you want to be going. Now, we should touch on Kilmarnock because, two outstanding results on their own patch at the start of the season, beating Rangers obviously in the opening day in the league, and then dumping Celtic out of the League Cup in the last 16. They haven't actually won a game since they dumped Celtic out the League Cup, but on their own patch, they're going to give Hearts a serious test, aren't they? I think they knocked them out the League Cup last season as well, so that tells you everything.
Yeah, knocked him out of the League Cup at Tynecastle, and went to Tynecastle in August and got a 0-0 draw, and were fully worthy of that 0-0 draw on the day. So you know what you're going to get with Kilmarnock. You know what you're going to get with Derek McInnes' team. Extremely well organised, difficult to break down, ready to take chances when they come along. And as I said, the way Kilmarnock are playing, that's not a tie that Hearts are going to relish on Tuesday night. It's just one of those games where you feel that if Hearts aren't completely on their game, then they're going to find it extremely difficult down there.
Can you see Kilmarnock doing a job on yet another big club on their own patch?
At the moment, you'd have to make Kilmarnock favourites. What I would say about Hearts is they're a different team when they get themselves in front. When they get an early goal, or indeed the first goal at any point in a game doesn't necessarily need to be early, but earlier the better. They do tend to build on that, and it seems to give them a bit of belief and momentum. So if they can go there and score first, then they have a good chance. They've certainly got the players to go to Kilmarnock and win that. There's no doubt about that. I think it's about knitting it all together, and as I say, getting that impetus earlier.
Indeed, well, we'll find out. There's live commentary on Sports Sound on Tuesday night, so make sure you tune into that. Let's touch on Wednesday's games now, because it's mouth-watering ties wherever you look. And we'll start with the Rangers at home to Livingston, because fairly or unfairly, when Celtic go out the Cup, Rangers become the favourites to win it, and they got a good win yesterday against Motherwell. Well, I say a good win, they got a win, but they were booed off the pitch and they weren't convincing. So we're talking about how important this competition is and a win is for Stephen Naismith and Hearts, but you've got to say the same for Michael Beale and Rangers, don't you?
I'm fully aware that Rangers aren't particularly playing at their best at the moment, and the defeat by Celtic at the start of the month was a real kick in the teeth for them, but they have won three games on the bounce since then, without conceding a goal, I would add. So if you're doing that and you're still getting booed off the pitch, it's, it seems to me a little bit of the fickle nature of some supporters. But you look at the league table, and yes, Rangers clearly want to have more points than they have at the minute. So I understand it from that point of view. Certainly at home to Livingston, Rangers overwhelming favourites. Livingston lost to 3-0 to 10-man Celtic at the weekend. So you're looking at that and saying, well, if they're going away to Rangers, then they're kind of on a heading to nothing a little bit. I think the investment side of things is vital for Livingston, because you see from the recent accounts and the losses that they've posted, it's unsustainable for a club of that size. They don't have a massive fan base that they can kind of turn to try and raise funds. So they're always going to be looking for some kind of outside investment, and they do need that for the long term. But in the short term, yeah, any kind of result away to Rangers is a huge bonus for Livingston, I'd say.
And Hibs St Mirren, that's mouth-watering as well, because Hibs have obviously got a draw and a win since Nick Montgomery replaced Lee Johnson. St Mirren absolutely flying, unbeaten in the league, second spot, and they've already been to Easter Road and won this season. So how do you see those teams matching up, Barry?
Yeah, I think this is tied around for me.
Yeah.
I like Nick Montgomery. I like everything that I've seen about him so far at Hibs, and I like everything I heard about him at Central Coast Mariners in Australia before that. And I think he'll bring. I think he has already brought and instilled a different kind of emphasis at Hibs. There's clear organisation. There's a structure on what he wants to do. He's very attack minded. He wants to get younger players involved. His team's got a lot of energy in it, and that's a lot of what the Hibs fans want to see. And St Mirren, as you've already explained, are going great guns this season. The way they've started the campaign is just a testament to the work that Stephen Robinson's done there and what he gets out of his players. He did the same at Motherwell, one of these managers who is capable of squeezing every ounce out of every player that he's got and really motivating everybody and getting them pulling in the one direction. So, yeah, I'm really fascinated to see how that one plays out at Easter Road.
And finally, Ross County against Aberdeen, a rerun of Sunday's league game, which Aberdeen ran out in emphatic 4-0 winners, which was a much needed victory, you would have to say, from Barry Robson's point of view. They're first in the league. I'm sure Malky Mackay will make sure that Ross County are not as poor as they were away at Pittodrie yesterday when they welcome Aberdeen on their own patch.
You would think so, yeah. I think one of the advantages of playing a team back-to-back like that is that you learn from the first game from a managerial point of view, and I think Malky Mackay and Ross County, you would hope, would do that and plug some of the gaps that appeared in that game. So Aberdeen have been really strange this season. They finished last season on a high and just haven't hit the mark so far this term. It's difficult really to say why. Is Europe a factor? Possibly, but we saw that last season with Hearts when they started in the group stages and it affected their league form. So Aberdeen's maybe partly suffering for the same way. But this is a little bit of respite for them as well, getting away from the league form. And like everybody else, as we've already said, it's a chance to get to Hampden and take one step closer to try and lift in a trophy with Celtic already out of the tournament. Right,
well, that's the League Cup quarter-finals. It really is a mouth-watering prospect, these four ties, and you can get them all covered on Sports Sound Tuesday night commentary of Kilmarnock against Hearts and then the other three ties on Wednesday night. Now it's time to look ahead to Scotland's game against Belgium in the Women's Nations League.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.
Right, I'm now joined by our reporter Amy Canavan because we're going to look ahead to the Scotland game against Belgium on Tuesday night in the Nations League. It's Scotland's second game, of course, after they lost 2-1 to England on Friday. It was a first defeat in 7 games, Amy, but I guess given the performance against England, particularly in the second half, I don't think confidence or momentum will be dented too much. Is that fair to say?
I think that's bang on, Thomas. There was an awful lot to like about that performance, and especially given it was obviously you've got the dimension of it being England for starters, but World Cup finalists, it was their first game since the World Cup, so there was an awful lot riding on it for both sides, and they are still World Cup finalists, still reigning European champions, and I don't think it's not outrageous to suggest that they are certainly on paper a far better side than Scotland, but more than match them. And it's the old cliche of fine margins, but it really was fine margins on Friday. That if Rachel McLaughlin doesn't lose Lauren Hemp, if Kirsty Hansen's fantastic volley just drops that second sooner, and if Martha Thomas gets that penalty for the apparent shove, certainly from where I was sitting, it seemed that Billy Bright sort of dunted her in the back, really. If those decisions and those little moments go Scotland's way, then it could have been a completely different tale. So there's so much to like about the performance on Friday, so many positives to take, because it was a real step up in quality. You mentioned, the good run that Scotland were on beforehand, but you've got to take into consideration the level of opponents that those teams were. The Australia games, the result and the performance that really stands out. It was still an Australia side that were slightly weaker than the one that we saw reach the semi-finals of the World Cup, but nevertheless, it was still an Australia side. So that was the one that really stood out. But this was a step up, other than Alessia Russo and Kira Walsh. That's as strong an England side as you were getting in the World Cup. And they're oozing off talent throughout. But Scotland, the second half in particular, and I think that's the half that you really want to focus on, they had them, the word was rattled. We were sort of speaking with our BBC Sport colleagues down south, our Salford colleagues, and that seemed to be the word of the night. Like I used that, Emma Black, our BBC Scotland, Radio Scotland commentator, used that, and Pat Niven, who was doing Five Live, all used it in the space of about 2 minutes, because that was the sense. It felt it was a bit of a sea change. And, I can't remember in the World Cup England really being on the ropes as much as Scotland really had them on the ropes. And, if for a few moments of quality, then it could have been a far different result. And no matter what, there is still so many positives to take going into this game on Tuesday against Belgium.
Yeah, but that'll be another tough task, because Belgium are a good side, and they, I think, shocked everyone in the group, in the League A group, by beating the Netherlands 2-1, a stoppage time winner. So although Scotland, as you say, plenty of positives to take from the England game, they're going to need to deliver a similar level of performance, you would think, if they want to get that first win in the section.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're bang on. There was certainly a lot of shock down in Sunderland when that result was kind of coming through. We expected Netherlands, obviously Scotland faced them last year as well in a friendly, again a performance that there was an awful lot to like, and if it wasn't for a late winner, that would have been a real standout result under Pedro Martinez-Losa, albeit a friendly. But this is the nature of being in League A of the Nations League. We're going to see it with the men's side as well, but this is exactly where Pedro Martinez-Losa needs his side to be and wants his side to be. He's never guided Scotland to a major tournament. That's obviously the ambition and it's the end goal. And I think it does need to come pretty sharpish, especially under this, or with this great group of players that Scotland have at his disposal. But these are top tier nations for a reason. But it's the only way really that Pedro, fans, the players themselves, are going to be able to see exactly where we're at, and it's exciting. I think the way that the Nations League is sort of set out as well, it's a lot of competitive games between now and December. It's going to be done and dusted by then, really, playing each nation twice, obviously. So it's got that, not quite domestic feel to it, of course, but it's better. We're not waiting 6-7 months in between competitive games for Scotland, and that's really what it had become earlier this year. So you're hoping that we can see that progression continue as the girls have more time together, more time under Pedro. He's picking, you can pretty much name about 19, 20 players that he's going to name every squad selection, with a few little tweaks, which is ideal as well, especially for a manager. We spoke about it with him, and he loves that. Not that it's becoming complacent, and you know that it's just no matter how these girls are performing, but they're performing at the top level week in, week out. We're starting to see, especially right now, the WSL don't start until this weekend. So it has been kind of a few more SWPL players coming in, which is obviously great for our game as well. So there is a lot required of the squad. The rotation is going to need to be there as well, but it is a much more competitive squad than I think we've seen in a few years. Certainly what Pedro's been managed to select. So there's quality throughout, and now it's about building on, as you say, that great performance on Friday, which it was. I think it speaks volumes that the key word, in the mix zone and the press out from the players, but from us as well, from the Scottish press down there, it was a sense of disappointment. I don't want to be too negative, but there were a few less optimistic folk heading down to Sunderland last week when we were speaking to them pre-match, and they thought it might have been a scudding, but it never materialised and never really looked like being like that at all, really, other than a shaky sort of 10 minutes. So Scotland can compete at this level, and with a hopefully decent backing at hand, then who knows what could happen. Yeah,
and just finally, Amy, briefly, there is a bit of news today with the squad. Kirsty Howat in for Emma Watson. What do you think that changes, if anything, in Pedro Martinez-Losa's plans for this game?
I think it's a very attacking swap as well. Emma Watson never travelled down to Sunderland on Friday. There wasn't too much information as to why that was. Might hear a little bit more today. But you just actually want to focus on Kirsty Howat. She is finally, it's the most deserved call-up, I think, in a wee while. She's never had a senior call-up. And her numbers, for Rangers over the last few seasons, when she's not been injured, she's been plagued by injuries. You know, her numbers are incredible, and I think this is more than deserved. She's got 7 goals already this season, and I think that's what I was talking about there. You know, it's like Amy Gallagher as well, getting her first call up. These are players that, you know, are 6-7 games into their season now, so it's not that sort of, you know, WSL pre-season feel about it. They've been playing at the highest level, having to be competing against, you know, for Kirsty Howitt's, you know, City and Celtic, and Amy Gallagher Rangers and City. So playing at a very high level. Kirsty Howitt, if she comes on for her debut, she will run herself into ground. The girl does not stop. She's relentless as a number 9. She's a proper out and out number 9, and she has a fantastic finish on her. She's got screamers left, right, and centre. I know you and I have both saw them. So it's exciting, and it's another name. That's what I'm saying, sort of kicking about in the mix. That when it comes to the next camp next month, you know, if she impresses, I doubt, or I wouldn't be surprised if her name's in the conversation again.
Okay, thanks, Amy. We'll be at Hampden tomorrow night. Really looking forward to that game. You can watch it, of course, live on the BBC Scotland channel. Coverage starts at 7:30. That's it for this edition of the Scottish Football Podcast. My thanks to Amy and to Barry Anderson. We'll be back tomorrow.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.